Some really good questions coming in, and what I might do here is to unmute our moderator just to bring in a voice. Catherine, can you hear me? I take you by surprise there, Catherine.
Hi there, Pete. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
You did.
I thought I did. Catherine, I see there's quite a few questions coming in. Are you able to read them out for us there? I can relay them to the guys here.
Yeah, sure. There's one that's come through around questions around sort of the way planning works. So is it that states have to do what the national body does, or should the state be informing what happens at a national level? And the same goes around how clubs and associations can sort of affect planning sort of up the chain. And Lee was just looking for some thoughts from Brendan there. It's
a question for Brendan. It's a great question. It's around the influence that states may or may not have on national body, and also how is it national bodies influencing states, or should states be influencing national, or clubs be influencing states? What about the flow of responsibility between state, club, and national, state, and club level?
I always come back to basics in this, I suppose, and saying what we're trying to do is we're developing a plan for the sport, and often when I'll talk with a national body and say, this is a plan for export Australia. It's not. It's actually a plan for export. And that's the plan that is setting the direction in the best interest of the sport, engaging states and the clubs and the members in developing that plan is very important, because while a state can gather that information and say, well, look, here's the national direction that we're going in, it all relies on local delivery, and a lot of the delivery at local level can have different nuances and might look differently. So I tend to see it as a group plan. Some of the most effective strategic plans I've seen are where state bodies and then right down to club bodies then have their plans reflect what a national plan or a national direction might look like.
I guess that's kind of a perfect case scenario, but certainly it's a goal. Catherine, other questions?
Yeah, one just came in, another one for Brendan while we're at it, around how do you sell the value of strategic planning to already time-poor volunteers or administrators? How do you sort of sell that as a really important thing that needs to happen?
I might pose it to Brendan and Grogs, this one. How do you sell the importance of strategic planning to time-poor volunteers and with organisations with stretched resources? How do you do the sell on strategic planning?
I think we have to make it as easy as possible, and strategic planning is not complex. There is a really good range of tools and templates that we can use to gather information before people come to a planning session, so they actually come pre-prepared and we're not starting from scratch each time. A strategic planning session shouldn't take hours and hours if people have done their homework, and it can be done in stages, so you can actually capture some key information to start with, bring that back, refine it, consult a little bit more, get the committee back again, and just use 2 or 3 steps sometimes to get to a point where it's ready to start drafting a plan. We all understand that volunteers are time poor, particularly in sport, and we want to make this as easy and painless as possible, but we can't diminish the importance of having a plan, no matter what level your organisation is at, to set the direction that you're travelling. Paul, do you want to add to that?
I think one of the challenges, of course, is that people feel that they have to have a particularly robust document and that it needs to be bound and it needs to have all these sort of checks and balances. Generally speaking, the ones that I've seen that are of that ilk are pretty useless. I'd much prefer to see half a dozen key outcomes clearly articulated with, Bill or Mary's responsibility, how much is going to be attributed to it in finances or support, and then have it come front of mind when they have their meetings. And if the plan is simply a shelf document, you may as well just cover it with dust when you write it. The idea is that it actually drives the conversation when the committee comes together around the kitchen table or around the board table. But yeah, good plans are discussed and chewed over and changed on a regular basis and updated as they go. So yeah, I go for lean and mean and keep it constantly in front of mind when you hold your meetings.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I've got another question I've spotted that's come in from John, and I think this might be on a few people's minds here. And certainly in my experience, the question is, do you have a strategic planning template or templates that you use? There's obviously pluses and minuses for templates. I'm interested to hear what the guys might think about use of templates for strategic planning.
Thanks, Pete. Look, I think it's very important that strategic plans aren't just taken off the shelf and adjusted to suit different organisations. I think there are some guiding principles that we can learn from each plan, but I think where the templates are useful is in gathering the information beforehand. So getting people's thoughts around what their priorities are, where they see some of the opportunities for improvement, what some of the barriers might be in actually achieving what we're trying to achieve. So those kind of templates, I think, are really critical in getting a good range of information, but in a coordinated way to make sure that you're asking all the right questions. That can then feed into a framework of a strategic plan without being a template that is designed for each organisation.
That's a very. Did you want to add to that at all, guys?
He's wrapped that up perfectly.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought so too. Catherine, have you got any others you want to? There's quite a few. We, like I say, guys, we will get to these questions even post webinar as well. But Catherine, have you got any more?
There was a point made by Luke which was actually asking about when you're actually going through a strategic planning process, what you do about looking at past strategic plans and evaluating what you did before and how that actually comes into play when you're planning for the future. So is there any thoughts from the guys on that? Like, do you start from scratch? How do you evaluate what you've done?
Yeah, the question is, how do you evaluate what you've done in the past when designing a new strategic plan? Is it better to start from scratch sometimes, or how do you evaluate the past performance against a strategic plan when you're designing a new one?
Evaluating a past strategic plan shouldn't be a surprise. One of the key things we talked about is ensuring that the strategic plan is reviewed regularly and monitored. So, as Paul said, the strategic plan really becomes the agenda for the board or the committee. Regular reviews will tell you how that plan is going and what you've learnt from it. And so when you come to start your new plan, you already have a lot of information if you've actually followed that process. But the new strategic plan is future focused. The past plan informs it, and the past results inform it. But you really are focusing on the future here.
Nice work. Thanks, Brendan. Catherine, have you got any more for us?
Maybe one more back towards when Paul started at the beginning of the webinar around the role around independent directors. So Sean has a question to ask about, do you generally see they really add value and competency to boards, and any further comments on that?
It was for Grogs about the value and competency of independent directors to boards. Have you got any comments around that, Grogs?
Okay. The idea of the independence of directors is to try and do a couple of things. One is to remove real or perceived conflicts. And when you have a representative board where, for example, in the past you'd have the president of each of the states would form the national board, their first duty is to their state, because that's what they were elected to, pre being put onto the national board. So they end up with a confused agenda. Because of the fact that they're drawn towards their loyalty to their state. But also, I think with independence, ultimately what we're trying to do is to engage skill-based people who are focused on the bigger agenda and being able to put all of their energy and efforts towards that. As I said earlier, it's can be a challenge because of the smaller organisations don't have the same access to that number of people. But one of the things I say to people is at least consider a nominations committee. There's the idea of holding a meeting and calling for directors or committee people from the floor is really an 11th hour strategy, and it's unsurprising when you don't tend to attract key skilled people to that with that approach. So giving plenty of lead time, having some people out there that are rustling around in the bushes, finding out, first of all, what's our skills audit? What do we need? we've looked at our plan. What sort of people do we need as leaders? Identify that, have a decent job description or role description for it, and then go out and literally beat the bushes and try and stir up some people who are prepared to come and put their hand up and to say, as an independent director, I will bring the following set of skills and experience to this to achieving these objectives. It does take a bit of time, but like most things, if you do it with the 11th hour, you will end up with what you end up with. If you get plenty of lead time with a good strategy, the chances of populating your board with good people dramatically increases.